are moments in life when words can do more harm than good. You've experienced it. A heated argument, an unjust insult, a challenge to your integrity. The instinct to react is powerful, yet it's often in these moments that the greatest strength lies in silence. Imagine for a moment the sheer power of controlling your reactions when the world is trying to provoke you. When the noise grows louder, you become the quiet force that remains unshaken. In that silence, you transcend the ego-driven chaos of others. Your calmness becomes the sharpest weapon in your arsenal, a weapon that destroys the fragile ego of anyone who tries to disturb your peace. It's not about suppressing your feelings, but about choosing your response wisely. This is the power of true self-control, a key Stoic practice that doesn't just shape how you interact with the world, but how you rise above it. But how exactly does silence hold such power over the ego? How does your self-restraint become the ultimate tool for personal strength and inner peace? Let's explore this profound principle together. Number 1. The battle within. In this chaotic world, we are often pushed to react. It's instinctive. Someone insults you, questions your abilities, or challenges your beliefs, and your immediate thought is to defend yourself. In these moments, it feels like silence is the coward's choice. But in truth, it is the bravest. The Stoics, masters of emotional control, understood that true power lies not in what we say, but in what we choose not to say. They knew that in the face of provocation, restraint was the highest form of strength. When we resist the urge to immediately react, we assert our control over our emotions. We become the masters of ourselves, unaffected by the storms around us. It's easy to give in to anger, to allow the external world to dictate our internal state. But every time we react impulsively, we surrender a piece of our power. Every word we speak in anger or frustration feeds the very thing we wish to escape, the ego. It is the ego that thrives on validation, that craves attention, and that seeks to win at any cost. When we give in to these urges, we feed that ego. But when we choose silence, we starve it. By choosing not to engage in the chaos, we break free from the grip of the ego. This doesn't mean we are weak or passive. Rather, it shows a deep understanding of our own strength. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." Our silence is not the absence of power. It is the presence of a higher form of control, one that others can't comprehend. Through silence, we show that we are not defined by the words or actions of others. We are not controlled by external circumstances, but by an inner strength that transcends everything around us. This is the essence of Stoicism, the ability to remain unmoved by the turbulence of life, to be a steady rock in the face of a crashing wave. It's through this steadiness that we find true peace, and it's in this peace that the ego of others crumbles. Number 2. The strength of restraint. Restraint is not simply the act of holding your tongue. It is the conscious choice to preserve your energy, your focus, and your peace of mind. The Stoics were not concerned with what others thought of them. Their attention was focused inward. They knew that their worth was not measured by the approval of others, nor were their actions driven by the opinions of the world. Instead, their thoughts were shaped by virtue, by wisdom, and by the unwavering belief that the only thing within their control was themselves. When you remain silent, you create space for clarity. You allow your thoughts to process without the immediate need for validation or reaction. It is in this silence that you can choose the higher path, the path that aligns with your values. In a world that is constantly seeking attention and drama, silence becomes an act of defiance, a way to show that you are not interested in petty games. You refuse to engage in battles that do not serve your purpose. Silence also serves as a mirror, revealing the true nature of those around you. People who thrive on drama, who seek to provoke, will be unsettled by your restraint. They will try harder to get a reaction, but the more they fail, the more they reveal their own insecurities. A person who relies on their ego to control others will never understand the power of silence. It's a tactic they cannot use against you. The more you withhold your reaction, the more you control the narrative. You shift the power from the external to the internal. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The anxiety we feel when provoked, the frustration that arises from conflict, these are all born from our own thoughts. When we react, we allow the external world to dictate our emotional state. But when we choose silence, we break free from this cycle. We return to the present moment, to the truth of what we can control. We don't react, we respond, and often that response is nothing at all. In this restraint, we find true freedom. Number 3, the power of inner peace. True strength lies in the ability to remain calm in the face of turmoil. When you practice silence, you cultivate an inner peace that no external force can disrupt. The world may howl with chaos, and people may shout their opinions into the void, but you remain steady, unshaken by the storm around you. This peace, cultivated through silence and restraint, is a powerful weapon. It is the source of your clarity and your resolve. The Stoics knew that the outer world is unpredictable, often volatile, and beyond their control. What they could control was their reaction to it. In a world that values speed, noise, and constant engagement, it is a revolutionary act to be quiet, to withdraw, and to focus on what truly matters. Epictetus, one of the most respected Stoic thinkers, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This encapsulates the essence of Stoic thinking. External events do not disturb us. Our reactions to them do. In a sense, silence is a shield. It is not passive, it is active resistance to the constant pull of distractions. When someone tries to provoke you, when the world demands your energy, your silence holds you strong. It reminds you that you do not have to engage. You don't need to respond to every comment or every criticism. When you understand the power of silence, you stop giving away your energy freely. You reserve it for the moments that truly require it, when your voice will make a difference, when your actions will be a force for change. Silence in these moments also serves as a mirror for others. It forces them to look inward, to question why they seek a response, why they need validation. The absence of a reaction reveals their own need for control and approval. In silence, you force others to confront their own egos, their own need to be heard. And in doing so, you diminish the power they once had over you. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In silence, you do not seek retribution. You do not lower yourself to the level of petty conflict. Instead, you rise above it, untouched by the noise, anchored in the peace that comes from knowing that your worth is not dependent on anyone else's opinion. Number 4. Confronting the ego. The ego thrives on conflict. It feeds on attention, on validation, and on the recognition of its existence. When someone tries to provoke you or drag you into an argument, it is their ego speaking, desperately seeking a response, desperately trying to assert itself. In these moments, silence is not just a retreat. It is an annihilation of the ego's power. When you do not engage, you deny the ego the fuel it so desperately craves. You refuse to give it the recognition it demands. The Stoic understands this instinctively. By remaining silent, by refusing to react to insults or challenges, you starve the ego. In this silence, the ego begins to wither. It has no ground to stand on, no fuel to ignite its power. Consider the wisdom of Seneca, who once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Most of the time, the conflict we feel arises not from the external world, but from the narratives we create in our minds. When someone insults us, when someone challenges our beliefs, the immediate response is often to engage, to defend, to fight. But in doing so, we are only strengthening the false narrative the ego has constructed. By choosing silence, we interrupt the cycle. We see the challenge for what it is, a fleeting, external moment, and choose not to allow it to stir the internal storm. This is not weakness, it is strength. It is the strength to be unmoved by the opinions and actions of others, to remain rooted in your own understanding and purpose. The Stoics were not indifferent to the world. They understood that injustice and hardship were inevitable parts of life. But they knew that the true measure of strength lay not in reacting to every insult or misfortune, but in maintaining an unwavering sense of self, in remaining calm and composed regardless of the situation. This is why silence is so powerful. It is not an absence of action, but a conscious choice to not engage in the destructive patterns that the ego demands. Silence, in this sense, becomes an act of defiance, a refusal to play the game of ego-driven conflict. Number 5. Mastering inner control. True strength does not lie in the ability to overpower others, it lies in the ability to control oneself. The ego, ever hungry for validation and dominance, seeks to provoke us, to drag us into battles that ultimately serve only to satisfy its insatiable desires. But the Stoic understands that it is not the outer world that disturbs us, but our inner reactions to it. By mastering our internal responses, we gain control over our external reality. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, famously said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." This wisdom reveals a profound truth. We do not need to let external events dictate our emotions or behavior. Instead, we have the power to shape our responses, to remain calm in the face of chaos, to be still amidst the storm. In our daily lives, we are constantly confronted with challenges. People who try to undermine us, situations that seem unfair, and moments when our pride is bruised. The first instinct is often to react, to defend ourselves, to rise to the occasion and prove our worth. But this reaction is the ego's call, a desire to be seen, to be acknowledged, to win the battle. The Stoic, however, understands that these battles are often meaningless. They are distractions from the true path of inner peace. By exercising silence in these moments, we gain the upper hand. We do not let our emotions control us. We take a step back, breathe deeply, and allow the storm to pass without being swept up in it. This is not passivity, it is an active choice to remain grounded, to hold on to our sense of self amidst the chaos of the world. Silence, in this context, becomes a tool of self-mastery. It is the means by which we refuse to give our power away to the forces that seek to manipulate us. By remaining silent, we are not submitting, we are asserting our control over ourselves, choosing to rise above the noise. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." This simple statement reveals the profound truth that our internal world shapes our external reality. If we allow our thoughts to be dominated by the ego, by the need to defend, to fight, to win, we will never find peace. But if we choose to cultivate silence to quiet the ego's demands, we can experience the true freedom of inner control. Number 6. The ego's fear of silence. It is important to understand why silence, especially in the face of provocation, is such a powerful tool. The ego thrives on attention. It seeks validation, recognition, and affirmation. When we engage in arguments or respond to insults, we feed it. The ego wants to prove its worth, to establish its dominance, and it will go to great lengths to achieve this. But what happens when we withhold our response? When we choose silence instead of engaging? The ego, confronted with the absence of attention, begins to wither. It cannot feed on our emotions, cannot draw energy from our reactions, and in that silence, the ego finds itself powerless. The very thing it fears most, being ignored, is what we offer it in our silence. This is why silence is so unsettling to the ego. It thrives on the chaos of conflict, on the struggle for dominance. But when it is met with calm, it has nowhere to turn. It begins to unravel, its grip on us loosens, and we reclaim our true power. By not engaging with the ego's provocations, we show that we are not afraid of it. We are not slaves to its demands. The ego's power is rooted in our attachment to external validation. It seeks to control us through pride, anger, and the desire to be right. But a Stoic is not concerned with being right. A Stoic is concerned with living virtuously, with maintaining inner peace. When we choose silence, we choose to live according to our values, not the ego's desires. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." When you are angry, do not speak or act immediately. Instead, pause, reflect, and let the storm pass. In this reflection, we find the strength to avoid the traps that the ego sets for us. We do not need to prove ourselves. We do not need to defend our honor. Our worth is not dependent on the validation of others. Our true power lies in our ability to remain calm, to stay centered, and to act in accordance with our higher values. In this silence, we find not weakness but strength. The Stoic does not fear the absence of recognition, does not crave the praise or condemnation of others. By choosing silence, we reveal a deeper truth. We are not controlled by external forces. We are the masters of our inner world. Number 7. Embracing the void of silence. In a world where noise is constant chatter, opinions, and demands, the act of choosing silence feels unnatural. Yet in the silence, we find clarity. This is a paradox. For the ego would have us believe that noise and action are the signs of power and success. It wants us to believe that only by speaking, defending, or reacting can we assert our presence. But the Stoic understands that true presence does not come from external validation, but from the inner peace that arises when we are not swept away by every external influence. When we embrace silence, we step into the void where the ego's clamor has no power. In that space, there is only stillness. There is no need to react, to explain, to prove anything. There is only the clarity of thought and the purity of our intent. In that silence, we become whole, and the noise of the world fades into the background. Silence forces us to confront ourselves. It strips away the distractions and allows us to see what lies beneath. Without the ego's constant noise, we begin to understand our own true nature. And what we find may not always be comfortable. We may discover our own fears, insecurities, and doubts. But this is not something to fear. In the absence of external noise, we are forced to look inward. And through this process of self-reflection, we begin to gain true insight into ourselves. The Stoics taught us that we cannot control the world around us, but we can control our response to it. The ego is not something we can destroy. It is an ever-present force that will continue to test us. But we can choose not to engage with it. We can choose silence, and in doing so, we can remain anchored in our values and our purpose. As Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When we choose silence, we choose not to allow the negativity of others or the chaos of the world to color our minds. We return to the purity of our own thoughts and the clarity of our own principles. This is where true strength lies, not in fighting every battle, but in knowing when to remain silent and stand firm in our own convictions. Embracing silence is a form of self-mastery. It is a refusal to be swept up in the distractions of the world, a recognition that our peace and strength come not from external validation, but from the stillness within. It is an acceptance that in the silence, we become whole. Number 8. The ego's final defeat. The ego, ever persistent in cunning, thrives in the noise. It feeds on recognition, validation, and the constant need to assert itself. It thrives in the external world, manipulating perceptions and demanding attention. However, when we choose silence, we weaken its power. The ego cannot survive in the absence of admiration or validation. It becomes irrelevant, for silence forces us to confront the truth. There is no need for external validation when we are grounded in our own inner truth. The true Stoic does not need to prove anything. There is no need to shout, to argue, to convince others of our worth. Instead, we remain calm, centered, and steady. When we are at peace within ourselves, the opinions of others lose their power. They no longer have the ability to disturb our peace or control our emotions. In silence, we find freedom. The Stoics understood that freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the ability to remain unshaken in the face of challenges. In a world that constantly tests us, the ability to remain calm and unperturbed is a powerful form of freedom. The ego, with its endless demands, seeks to entrap us in a never-ending cycle of seeking approval and defending our sense of self. But the Stoic knows that true freedom comes when we no longer depend on the approval of others. In silence, we let go of the need to justify ourselves. We allow our actions to speak for us, and through them, we reveal our true nature. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, wrote, "A good character, when properly cultivated, is not affected by the judgment of others. It is not swayed by the winds of fortune or the opinions of the masses." This is the power of silence. It allows us to cultivate a character that is steadfast and unwavering. It allows us to be true to ourselves, regardless of the external noise. The silence we embrace is not a form of retreat or avoidance. It is not a withdrawal from the world, but rather a refusal to be drawn into the chaos. It is a deliberate choice to center ourselves and to focus on what truly matters, our inner strength and our values. Through this, the ego is defeated, not by force, but by the sheer power of our indifference to its demands. The more we embrace silence, the more the ego withers away, for it has no room to grow in the presence of true peace. In embracing silence, we return to the essence of who we are. We no longer need to seek validation from others, for we are anchored in our own truth. The ego may continue to try to rise, but it will never succeed in the face of our unwavering calm. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only goal that is worth striving for, and it is in silence that we achieve this freedom." And the last, number 9. Conclusion. The path to inner strength. In the quiet of silence, the ego loses its grip. It is in this stillness that the Stoic finds their truest self. The world may rage around us, full of noise, conflict, and the constant need to prove our worth. But the Stoic remains untouched. For they understand that the real battle is not with the world but within. It is a battle against the turbulent emotions, the need for validation, and the desire to be seen. In silence, we conquer these forces and restore peace within ourselves. Through silence, we learn to listen, not only to others but to ourselves. We begin to hear the whispers of our true nature, the quiet voice that speaks of wisdom, strength, and purpose. This voice is not swayed by the loud clamor of external opinions, for it is rooted in something far deeper. It is the voice of the Stoic's heart, aligned with the cosmos, undisturbed by the fleeting distractions of the world. The Stoics taught us that true power lies not in the ability to dominate others, but in the ability to master ourselves. To remain calm in the face of adversity, to remain unmoved by praise or criticism, and to act with purpose, guided by reason. It is not the loudest voice or the most dramatic gesture that earns respect, but the quiet strength that comes from self-control and fortitude. As we walk this path, let us remember that silence is not weakness. It is the ultimate expression of strength. In a world obsessed with noise, where the ego reigns supreme, silence becomes a weapon, a tool for those who seek inner peace and mastery over themselves. The more we embrace it, the more we free ourselves from the chains of ego, and the more we cultivate the true freedom that the Stoics spoke of. The path to silence is not an easy one. It requires discipline, introspection, and a willingness to confront our own insecurities. But in that silence, we find clarity. In that silence, we find strength. And in that silence, we destroy the ego, not through force, but through indifference. We are not defined by the opinions of others. We are defined by the strength of our character, the clarity of our actions, and the peace we cultivate within. So let us walk this path together, not as seekers of validation, but as warriors of the mind, masters of our emotions, and conquerors of the ego. Through silence, we shall find our true strength. What are your views on this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.